Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge Körper, Kopf, Karriere. Normalerweise sind die immer auf Deutsch. Diese Folge jetzt wird auf Englisch sein und wenn Englisch nicht deine Muttersprache ist, dann bleib trotzdem dran. Das ist sehr interessant und ich denke, du wirst auf jeden Fall etwas mitnehmen. Wir sprechen nämlich über Breathwork. A very warm welcome to a new episode of Körper, Kopf, Karriere, which means body, mind and career. Normally, these episodes are in German. And if I have very special guests, we want to do it in English. So here is my guest, Simona, Breathwork Instructor. A very warm welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. It is nice to be here in this space with you again.
Again, yeah, because we have a really interesting story how we get to know each other. So actually, to be honest, we dated the same guy. I just did some research and I reached out and I said, if it is possible to have a conversation. And you said yes. So this is 6 years ago, actually, and we hold contact until today because we have lots of similarities. So you are a breathwork instructor. Besides that I am a master of ceremonies, I am a yoga teacher. So breathwork obviously is something which we do, and working with a breath and with a body. And then you lived in a mobile home. I have a camper van. You walked, or we, the two of us, we walked the Camino, the St. James Way. And your parents live in Czech, or you are from the Czech Republic, and my parents live in the near of the border of the Czech Republic. So I think our parents live like 1.5 hours apart. And for a short time, you also lived in Germany. So as I said, there are a lot of similarities, and especially regarding this guy, it's a blessing in disguise. And yeah, 4 weeks ago, we met in person because I had to travel to England, and I thought you live in the near of London, and then you said you live in Glastonbury, actually, in the Holy Land of Avalon, and this is a place which I always wanted to visit. And so 4 weeks ago, we met each other in person, and we just gave each other a huge hug and had 2 wonderful days with each other. It was amazing. And then I said, oh, you know what? I want to start a podcast. Do you want to be my guest? And here we are.
Yes,
So thank you
it's
so
quite
much.
quite an unusual story, but how beautiful.
Yeah.
I also want to highlight that we didn't date the same guy at the same time. They were a few years apart.
No.
So just to give
Yeah.
him credit that it was done the
Yeah.
right way. But also
Yeah.
just this, what I want to honor in you, and that's what I admired in you as well, that reaching out and wanting to hear my side of the story, that was really, I thought there was a real emotional maturity, and I really respected you, your curiosity to reach out and have a conversation. And we spoke about him a little bit, but then we just went off into what we like, and then we developed this
Yes.
friendship online for 6 years until meeting in person. So how amazing is that as well? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I have the same impression because what I've heard so far was, of course, like a subjective version. And then I just met you online and you are this sun and smiling and
Oh,
everything. So it's a really nice connection.
thank you.
Okay, so today we want to talk about breath. So gladly, we breathe 12,000 times a day, but we don't need to think about it. We do it subconsciously. But we can take our focus on our breath to be aware and to get rid of stress and a lot of benefits. So we want to talk about that. So do you remember your first breathwork session?
I do remember my first breathwork session. But before the breathwork session, I also like to talk about the first time I was really connected to the breath as well. And that was actually when I was 4 years old and my sister was born. Yeah, and I was so worried that something could happen to her that I would go and check if she's breathing. So literally at the age of 4 years old, I was already aware that, and I think we are all on some primal level, that breath means life. And that the breath actually means that we're alive, we haven't lost, we have our loved ones around us. So that was the first time I actually consciously, without being aware of it, connected to the breath. And then fast forward 20 years later, I was living in Sydney in Australia, and I met this wonderful lady called Elaine who initiated me into Reiki, and she was also a rebirther. So she gave me a breathwork session, and the breathwork session was super special because she actually did it on my birthday at the time I was born. She did this rebirthing session. I know, quite an unusual thing. And I spent the night at her house because in Australia, my birthday, the actual birth time was around, I think it was 4 a.m. or something like that. So she woke me up and then she guided me through the breathwork session. And I remembered I had visions. This was before I even moved to England. I had visions of being in England, and it felt like a past life of things were happening, and I saw my beloved riding off on a horse away, and I had this sadness that I knew I never saw him again. So it was really interesting, that again, that connection to the breath and to loss and what can happen, and just, yeah. So I also am trained in past life regression, so I've been connected to that for a very long time as well. So that's also the breath. It can get us into those altered states of being, where we can also access past lives or do deep healing on the current situation, current life, and so on. It can give us a different perspective. So I had that amazing experience. And so I knew about breath work, yeah. And then since then, when I moved to England, I started researching because I was also doing massage and craniosacral. So I was looking for the next thing, and I knew that breath work was basically the next thing, because especially craniosacral, we deal with birth trauma, the first breath as well. So, sorry, my camera's a little shaky. My dog is lying next to me, as you know. She's just napping and kicking her legs.
Oh, yeah, such a wonderful dog.
Raya, yes. And when she was a puppy, I just remembered as well, when she was a puppy, I was lying on the floor and she climbed on top of me and her nose went onto my nose and we took this deep breath together. And I was amazed as well of, oh, like puppies do that as well, of just sniffing your nose and seeing how you're breathing. And anyway, that's on a different note. But just, yeah, as your breathwork facilitator, you notice the breath patterns, not just in yourself, but animals as well, how they breathe, and yeah, what that says about their nervous system. Yeah, so that's how I edit then breath work as well. So I'm skipping around. I'm too excited talking about the breath.
Yeah, it's so amazing that you are excited, and it's so fascinating that you had like the first conscious experience when you are 4 years old. That's incredible. Um, so yeah, and then you were in England, and what brought you to the decision why and what to become a breathwork instructor?
So I was looking for the right course for me, and I was literally scrolling on Instagram, and Anthony, the founder of Alchemy of Breath, so the company that I studied with and the company that I work for, literally just his face popped up on Instagram, his account, and I knew straight away. So it was like a recognition of, that's my teacher. So I didn't need to research anymore. It was literally, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It was literally that, just scrolling on Instagram. And so I researched the courses. It just felt really perfect because it was all online. This was in 2018. So he was already this visionary of doing these courses online, even pre-COVID. And so yeah, I signed up, did this course. Part of the course is also going into your inner journey as well. So the hero's journey, it's inner child healing, it's connecting to your shadow, it's finding your gifts as well. So it's not just about becoming a breathwork facilitator, but it's also dealing with your internal landscape. So that also makes you a better breathwork facilitator, holding space for other people, that you actually are aware of your wounds and your patterns, and you can recognize that in others as well.
I think in general, that's for a lot of situations when you are a facilitator or a yoga teacher or a coach, that you know your wounds. And sometimes people say you can only heal what you experience. I'm not sure about that, but as you said, you be aware of your own wounds. And in yoga, for example, we talk about pranayama, a bit what you said, like it's the life force. So you have, for example, the Kapalabhati, the fire breath, or the Anuloma Viloma, where you close one nostril. And in alchemy of breath, as far as I know, or as I understand, it's the connected breath. So you do the inhaling and exhaling without a pause, without a break. And that for a several amount of time, like 45 or 60 minutes to get in a certain state. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so breathwork is quite a broad term of, what is breathwork. It is literally us being aware of our breathing and changing our state through our breath as well, so regulating our nervous system. So it's a huge category of what goes into the term of breathwork. And yes, with alchemy of breath and many other branches as well, it's the conscious connected breath. So we're conscious of our breathing and the breath is also connected. So unless people are experienced, we don't really teach breath holds, and it's more about just getting into that altered state of being. The session can be the actual breathing 45, 60 minutes. There are other branches as well of, for example, I forgot the name now, but it's Stangrof holotropic breathing. They do actually, I think it's 2 or 3 hours, maybe even longer. So it's very shamanic. They use different music. They go, much deeper for a longer time. So we usually do 45 to 60 minutes, and yes, so it also changes. It changes your brain waves basically. So again, that altered state of being. But it might sound like it's something woo-woo, but actually our brain waves change throughout the day naturally. We're in a different brain wave now when we're actually talking and we're conscious and we're focusing, rather than when you go for a walk or when you do sports and you get into this sort of zone, and that's more a hypnotic state. That also naturally happens when we watch TV. We just get into this hypnotic state, and that's why we're so susceptible as well to advertisements and so on. And a different state before we go to sleep as well. So, and then deep sleep. So we just go through these cycles naturally. So the conscious connected breath work is that we go into that with an intention. That you can set an intention, something that you want to look at in your life. There could be a theme, a topic, whether it's forgiveness or abundance or creativity. So the sky is the limit of depending what you're working through and what you're working on. And so it gets you into that altered state of being, so you can also access these higher states of consciousness that you naturally access through being in meditation. But it's the same state when you're standing in the shower or doing the dishes. You sometimes also just get into that altered state, and all of a sudden you get this idea or an insight or an answer to an issue, like, oh, I haven't thought of that before. Again, because your brain waves change, so you have access to different areas of your brain. So it's partly that, and it's also in breathwork, so many people say that it's about more oxygen, but our oxygen levels are quite constant. They're about 98% in our body. So it's actually the CO2, the carbon dioxide, that actually makes a difference on how much your body actually releases that oxygen into the tissues. So that's what we're doing with breath work as well. Any sort of breath patterns, it doesn't have to be conscious connected breath. We are actually working with the CO2 level and how much oxygen our body can actually absorb. So one of the topics that I'm very passionate about as well is anxiety, because I have also suffered from anxiety in my life. I've had panic attacks as well. So it's science, how we can stop having panic attacks, how we can actually stop ourselves having anxiety. So it is working with that O2 CO2 balance consciously as well, and how we can change that chemistry in our body.
Thank you so much. Such a great explanation. As you said, there are studies. It is science. And can you explain a little bit more what does happen emotionally and physically? So I recognized being dizzy a bit or tingling in my finger, sometimes even a cramp. So maybe you can talk about that. Or also we have some emotions which are stuck, and then you can release them.
Yes, so partly it is, we are in conscious connected breath work functionally overbreathing. So overbreathing actually usually is dysfunctional. We breathe too much, too shallow, and that is actually not good for our body, our mind, our focus, our digestion even. As when we take nice deep breaths into our belly, it's so obvious, but we don't do it. When we breathe into our diaphragm, the diaphragm actually expands and massages our digestive system. So that's one of the things, for example, for improved digestion. When you take deep inhales and full exhales as well, we are actually working with the digestive system. So our body works in synergy, but we're just not using it correctly and to its full potential, how we could be using it. For example, now when we're talking, I'm also noticing in myself that's something I do. We breathe through our mouth, right? Because we're talking a lot, and then we need to take deep, quick sips of air, so we breathe through our mouth. So even that, of if we can actually, when we talk or presenting, for example, teachers, there's a lot of mouth breathing, or people in meetings, a lot of mouth breathing. So mouth breathing actually is dysfunctional. So we need to breathe through our nose as well, because we get nitric oxide as well. This is really important, and that only gets created when we breathe through our nose. So I'm also being very conscious of breathing through my nose as we talk, which is also a challenge for myself. So I'm definitely not a master. I'm also learning as I go along and reprogramming my body. It's a long journey as well. And so, for example, with the breathwork session, so what you described as well, the tingling, it could be also cold energy. Some people experience tetany as well, which is a tightening of hands or tightening of the jaw or even feet. So it also is that they're breathing out too much CO2. So it's actually forcing out the exhale. So what we teach as well is in that breathwork session, when we do conscious connected breath, the focus is on the inhale and then allowing the exhale to happen naturally. So again, when we actually release too much CO2, we think of it as waste gas, but actually it is the gas that helps us to absorb oxygen. So when people breathe out too much, too forcefully, they basically expel too much CO2, and that's when it happens that, especially if people don't have enough minerals in their body, so if they suffer from cramps, they might be even more susceptible to tetany as well, and tightening and spasms in their muscles as well. So again, it's about hydration, about remineralizing our water as well. So it's not just the breath. There's so much that goes into that as well, through our nutrition, the water that we drink, the air that we breathe as well. If you're in a big city with a lot of pollution, that's going to change your breathing and your chemistry as well. So yeah, and then also within the breathwork session, because usually there's a peak halfway through, so it's also about climbing, breathing actually deeper, and we're breathing through the mouth, but there's a specific reason as well. So we can also allow the body to go in a gentle and safe way into the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight. Because what happens when we're actually trying to run away or to fight, we do breathe through our mouth. It just allows us to get connected to the breath, and maybe actually in a way, like when we're exercising, for example, that's also one of the ways that we breathe through the mouth when we're out of breath. So that's one of the few times that we can also breathe through the mouth, that our body basically has that hunger for air. But also that's the CO2 paradox. We're trying to get more air, but actually breathing less helps us to actually, for our body to have more CO2, to actually then absorb more oxygen. But then there's the other paradox as well, that sometimes we actually feel that having too much CO2 is also like a panicky feeling in our body if we're not used to it. So we can also feel that, oh, I'm feeling stressed or anxious, but I don't know why. It could also be the rising CO2 levels. We're not used to it, and our body actually thinks it's in danger. So it's literally about developing the capacity and basically building up the CO2 bit by bit, so our bodies can start to absorb more oxygen.
And you just said like we can calm down also with this type of breath. I just saw a girl and she hyperventilated, not in breath work, just in general. She hyperventilated, and then people came and gave her a bag, and she could breathe inside. And I thought, if you could lead her right now through this, I think it would be so beneficial for her, right, to calm down again. I cannot describe it in a biological way, but do you know what I mean?
Yes, but the bag is the CO2. The bag actually absorbs more CO2, so it's actually bringing
Okay.
the CO2 back into her body, so her body then can absorb the oxygen. So it's a really good technique, especially, when someone is in panic and they're hyperventilating. When you tell them breathe and calm down, that's the last thing they want to hear, right? It's the body already going through this process of something was too much. Her nervous system was in overwhelm, and it needed to discharge. And this was the panic attack is actually a way of discharging. So for someone like that, and myself included, that's how I stopped having panic attacks, is recognizing when my nervous system is in overwhelm. My God, Doggy is going a little crazy. So when the nervous system is already in overwhelm and basically discharging as you go along, so you don't have to actually let it get to that extent where your body actually then needs to discharge through a panic attack, which is also the body, there's this example of, when an antelope, for example, gets chased by a lion in nature, what it does is when it escapes, it finds safety and it shakes. It actually is releasing the adrenaline naturally. And we as humans, we don't do that, right? We get upset, we get angry, and we keep everything inside, right? Like all this tightness that we have in our jaw from not expressing our emotions, not actually speaking our truth. We hold it all in. So it's basically adrenaline and other hormones and, even lactic acid, for example, as well, from just holding too much. Our bodies just get so sore, and it leads to fatigue as well because our adrenals get overstimulated and so on. So it's a whole cycle. But it is that if we learn to discharge, so for example, just in the evening, if you had a tough day, putting on your favorite song and just shaking and moving your body, letting that adrenaline actually get out of your body, or mindfully breathing or doing yoga. I'm sure you have many, many tools in your toolbox as well of how to discharge emotions and energies and, it doesn't have to be every day, but especially if we had a tough day, how can we actually deal with that without storing those things and until, so like bit by bit and then we explode, right? It is that of how can we be conscious of our body and our emotions.
Yeah, especially the word emotion means emotion, a feeling is in movement. So movement for me is a great tool, like shaking, as you said, or movement in general, like running or even more walking. Because in running, sometimes when we overpace, then we have this fight or flight mode. Um, and you mentioned the nervous system. I've read so many things about the nervous system in the last time, so I have the feeling that more and more people get conscious about a regulated nervous system. So how can breath work or alchemy of breath help with that for a regulated nervous system?
Yes, so with our nervous system, things like our digestion, our heartbeat, we can't control. It's just there, it's automatic. And so is our breath, but the breath is also the only thing that we can also control from the sympathetic, the going into the parasympathetic. So we can take ourselves from the fight, flight, or freeze as well into the parasympathetic, into that rest and digest. So it's always with us, our breath. It's always accessible. It's for free. We don't have to pay anyone. We don't have to, like supplements, of course you have to pay. So it's always there. So how can we develop that relationship with our breath and actually help it to, in a way, how can we, it's not just for the breath to serve us, but it's so sacred as well, the breath. There's so much focus on the first breath and the last breath. So it is a sacred thing. We can do so much with our breath, from calming down, energizing, to certain ways we use our breath as well, in tantric traditions and so on. It's blissful states. It is connection when you actually eye gaze and breathe with someone. It's coherence when we're with someone else. Our breath also matches each other after a while as well. So when you're in a group of people and just take a deep breath, how many other people will take a deep breath all of a sudden as well, or yawn? Right? Yawning as well is a way of your nervous system regulating itself, and then other people yawn as well. So we do mirror each other. So just the power of the breath. That's why I call my company also Empowered Breath, because you can empower yourself with your breath. It's always there. It's always present while we're alive. We can be usually 3 minutes without a breath before we die, or of course some people can stay much longer without a breath. I think the record is about 20 minutes or even around that of, this guy who actually knows how to shut down his organs so they actually don't need any oxygen in that moment, so he can actually preserve his oxygen in his cells. It's quite incredible. But we know we can be about 3 days without water, and we can be about 3 weeks without food. So the breath also is the most crucial thing about how we actually absorb prana, life force, energy, besides water and food as well, is the breath. So just, the importance of it and how to breathe
Wonderfully
fully.
spoken.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, wonderfully spoken. What you said, that the breath is sacred. And my yoga teacher, she also said the breath is our guest. So invite it in your body, in the different parts of the body, and going down and in your back, and yeah, guide it through your body, which is a house or a temple as well. And how can we heal trauma with it? Or do you remember like a moment of a student of you released something or had this massive shift?
Oh, just too many to mention as well. Too many. And the most amazing thing with breath work as well, when we hold space for someone else, is we don't actually know what's happening with people. We can use our intuition and, support them with touch and so on as well. Or we can sometimes whisper the exact thing that they need to hear in that moment. So we work as channels as well of, feeling into someone's process as well. But it's not until they come out of the journey that they actually share where they've been and what happened to them. So, I mean, the stories are just absolutely incredible and just too many to even mention, even, for example, if people wanted to try breathwork, so Alchemy of Breath do 2 breathwork sessions for free online every Sunday. So there's one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And there are usually around 350 people. So, it's such an honor as well, leading sessions like that. And then, on Zoom, you just get all these messages of what people went through and what they experienced and how different they're feeling. And, it's so incredible. And those sessions are actually even shorter. They're around 35 minutes because we only have an hour altogether. So, just to give the explanation of the breath work and so on, and then take shares at the end. So we usually have 35 minutes. So even that, or even meeting up with someone and just saying, hey, can we take 5 breaths together? That can already shift someone's state as well, especially in meetings when we have a lot to get through or someone's running late. Instead of rushing through it, we spoke about that when you were here in Glastonbury, how can we actually slow down time? It's not about going and doing more and faster. It's actually how can we slow down, take a breath, even if it's just 2 breaths together. That can already shift our state of being, and then we can actually be more productive because we're in a more resource state, and creativity flows in that resource state much more as well, rather than when we're rushing, right? So it's like a counterproductive of what we think we should be doing versus how our bodies actually operate.
Yeah, it's incredible because as you just mentioned, you said, and when we were in England, I had like a 10-minute slot, and then I had a call, and we were in the middle of a conversation. We had such a deep talk, and you were like, you know what? We can stretch time. So now we take this extra time. Or you said to me, when you have a client and you recognize he or she is in a deep trauma right now, but the hour is like going to an end and you have like 10 minutes left and he's so in this trauma, then you extend the time in it, which is amazing because then we talk about quantum technology or quantum leap. It's so amazing. Actually, I remember one breathwork session when I was at a yoga retreat at Tenerife, and we had 2 instructors. They were really good, and we were in the middle of the session, and then one of the teachers came to me and grabbed underneath my rib cage because I had some stuck emotions there. And then I was so released. My body was so free, and I had joy, and I had tears coming off, like this whole tension all the time, like I carried like for my whole life. And then it was just released and I could relax. This was like amazing. So what would you say, why is it necessary to have a good instructor, as you just said, like you hold the space for people and they open up to you?
Yeah, the importance is, we need to feel safe. right? If we feel safe, it's all about safety within ourselves, within relationships. If we don't feel safe, we're naturally not going to open up. We're actually going to guard ourselves more. We're going to actually armor more as well, right? And a lot of it, for example, what you described about your experience of someone actually coming and holding a particular body part as well. And we don't also need to know what we're going through and what we're releasing, because a lot of what we experience is also pre-verbal. So before we actually have language, before we can actually express ourselves, before our brain waves change, because our brain waves are in a more meditative state the first 7 years of our lives, and then it switches more into the logical mind. So we're much more emotional and feeling a lot more in the first 7 years of our life, right? And we're not able to fully verbally express what I'm feeling, what I need. You know, we're sort of dependent on our caregivers. So even that, it's very important for the body. You know, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. We do hold a lot of emotions and unprocessed feelings in our body. So sometimes we don't even need to know what it is, because it could have been that you were a baby and you were actually hungry, but your mum actually changed your nappy instead of feeding you, or vice versa. Or you were cold and she gave you food, for example, you know. So it's all these unmet needs and expressing and crying, and no one actually either hears us or no one picks us up, or you know. So it's unmet needs and the wounding, the stories that we create around that, even if it's more on a physical level rather than the mental level, the logical level. So that's why it's so important as well to have someone hold your process and be present with your process, that they can also allow you the space and the time for you to complete the trauma, because that's what trauma is. It's a cycle that hasn't been completed yet. There's still some opening in that you haven't fully healed that, or fully understood, or haven't fully brought it back into love or understanding, acceptance. So it's really important most of us need that to be seen, heard and understood. So if you have a good facilitator, and that goes not just breath work, but any sort of therapy, anywhere where you actually make yourself vulnerable, and where you actually share some of the deepest wounds that you have, it is someone that can actually be present for you, you know, that you don't feel judged or rushed, or, you know, made feel wrong about what you're feeling. I had, for example, the other day, a client who, I was actually doing a massage. Out of all things, I was just doing a massage, and we were just chatting about, you know, just what was present in his life. And he said, yeah, my therapist told me not to feel guilty. And I thought, what? Like, but you're feeling guilty. So how does that help to say not to feel guilty, you know? And maybe he was paraphrasing, but maybe the therapist didn't say it in those words. But he was made to feel that he shouldn't be feeling the guilt. So they just said, okay, so feel the guilt. Where do you feel it in your body? And he started crying, right? So it's just this emotion of being given permission to actually feel what you're feeling, instead of that not wanting to be there for whatever reason. So I think that's also a good sign of a space holder, of just acknowledging what is there. And even those, you know, whether it's shame that we're feeling, you know, whatever it is, all these unpleasant emotions that are there, just also normalizing them, because we have this whole spectrum of emotions that we're feeling. And, you know, we had that chat as well. We can also feel happy and at the same time sad, right? Yeah. It's okay, we can have that, or we can feel excited for someone at the same time feel jealous. You know, we have all these layers. And when we acknowledge them of, okay, I feel excited for someone, but at the same time I feel jealous because they have something that I don't have, or something that I want, you know, that's okay. Instead of just saying, oh, I should just be excited, that's it. Well, the jealousy is still going to be there, you know, so we can also explore, okay, I'm jealous. What is that? Oh, because I didn't have something when I was a child, or someone had more than me, or, you know, and we can go in layers deeper and deeper. And if we simplify it, you know, there are only two emotions, which is love and fear. You know, it's the opposite end of the spectrum, and then we can put them into subcategories of love and fear. But that's very simplified, of course. You know, we can talk about that more. But yeah, so I would say there are so many courses at the moment that are popping up online, weekend courses to become breathwork facilitators and so on. I think it's okay if someone is, I probably shouldn't even say that it's okay. I could imagine if someone's already a therapist and a space holder and they have many tools in their toolbox, that if they want to learn about breathwork or teach people about breathwork, a weekend course still isn't enough. But yeah, the course in Alchemy of Breath is for 9 months online, right? So it actually is like you go through your own journey first for 3 months, and then you go for 6 months into the facilitation training, because there's so much to learn. I'm still learning about the breath. I still don't know everything. Absolutely not. I still do a lot of research and reading, and there are so many books available now as well. People writing about breath and breath work, and obviously new science that's coming out as well. There's actually this amazing neuroscientist called Lana Powers. She's actually in Germany doing research on breath work. So she's absolutely incredible, and she takes people in to do breathwork session with all the notes on the head and the brain and I think it's ECG, or I might be wrong of what it's called, and actually looking at the brain, what it does during a breathwork session. And so she's one of the people that actually is taking it to the next step of actually really scientifically researching what is happening to our breath and our body and our brain during a breathwork session. Because we can talk about the O2 levels, CO2 levels, and nervous system and acidity, alkalinity in your body, but unless we measure it, it's still a bit of a mystery, right? We don't really know what's happening within our bodies.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for your remarkable insights. And maybe I can check her out and I can
Absolutely.
reach out. And it's also so good that you mentioned you have to dive deep when you want to be an instructor, and you do the teacher training for like 9 months and not just one weekend. It's the same about Reiki. For you have different sessions, or also for being a yoga teacher, and it's not just only a weekend retreat, and then you are the facilitator. Are there any groups of people where you would say you wouldn't recommend it? I don't know, like for example, pregnant women or people who had a heart attack or depression or whatsoever.
Absolutely. So there are contraindications because we don't have enough research with breath work and what it does. And again, we don't know exactly what is happening within someone's body. There might also be underlying heart conditions that people don't even know about themselves as well. So I would always say with breath work that go slowly. It's not about just jumping in and going crazy. Be gentle with your nervous system as well. Explore what it does to you, not just during the breathwork session, but also afterwards. The integration, it takes time. So definitely, there's epilepsy, and also being careful with bipolar, heart conditions, detached retina as well in the eyes. It can actually create too much pressure in the eyes. So also if anyone has had detached retina. So there is sorry. So there are contraindications, a protective dog. There are contraindications to be aware of, pregnancy, one of them as well. But the thing is with breath work is also that you can breathe through your nose. So it doesn't have to be a deep journey through the mouth. You can also breathe through the nose. And actually the more I do breath work, the more I do it through the nose. And I find that I go so deep as well. It's more the intention and the nose breathing. And I think also because I can take a few breaths and go into a deep space very fast. So the more you do it, actually, the more gentle you can go. It doesn't have to be the full-blown mouth breathing. Yeah.
I can imagine. So now I'm curious. We talked so much about it. Is it possible that you can show us, or that we can do a short session and maybe the audience could take part in as well?
Yeah, I mean, the conscious connected breath we also do through with music as well. I would say maybe what we can do right now as well is I'll mention the vagus nerve as well, because that's really important, just to give you an idea, and then I'll take you, maybe let's do coherence breath, because that's a simple one, that's a really easy one, and it brings us into balance again. But I also want to talk about the vagus nerve. So it's one of the cranial nerves, and it's called the vagus nerve out of the word vagabond because it actually travels through our body, and it's only 20% of the brain that sends signals to the vagus nerve to our body, but it's the other way around. Of 80% of the vagus nerve actually collects information from the body and sends it back to the brain. So that means that if we're breathing into our belly, we are actually sending our body the signals that we're safe to rest and digest. And the vagus nerve then sends signals to the brain. Oh, we're breathing into the belly. We are safe. We can actually relax. So that's also a nice way, a simple way to manipulate, in a way, our nervous system, of getting it to where we want it to be, which is more resourced, more calm, deep breathing, slow breathing, and then everything will improve as well, from digestion to presence to focus and so on. So the coherence breath, basically our body has an electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetic field of the heart is 60 times bigger than of the brain. So when we're actually sitting next to someone, it's actually 1 meter away from our body. So when you're sitting next to someone, you're actually in their electromagnetic field of their heart. And this has been all measured through HeartMath. So that's also a great company that deals with breath work and the electromagnetic fields and nervous system regulation as well. And so we have this electromagnetic field that we can actually feel of other people, and we go into resonance when we're around other people as well. So, the more resource we can be and enter a room, the more resourcefulness we can also bring into spaces. So this coherence breath also brings everything into balance: our breathing, our heart, electromagnetic field, the brain waves of the brain. And so we're just getting us into presence and as a whole. And it's very simple because it's 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, and it's breathing through the nose. And I will also want to say, if someone is actually feeling a bit anxious at the moment, 5 seconds might feel too long. So it's okay if someone, from the listeners as well, if you can only do 3 seconds in and 3 seconds out, it's okay, just start with that. And then slowly extend. Maybe in a few breaths you can actually do 4 seconds and then extend to 5 seconds. And for some people that have already a good CO2 tolerance, because again, if it actually makes you feel anxious, that also means that the CO2 is you're not used to it yet. So you actually might feel air hunger, or feeling I need to breathe more, and it can make us a little bit more panicky. But some people can also do 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out. So we can do that together now. So just one breath and breathing out, so we actually have a fresh start. So breathe out fully. And then we do in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, and breathe and count within your mind now. And on the next exhale, you can come back into the space. So what has shifted for you? I mean, it was literally 1 minute.
It's amazing how calm I am right now. So we could have done this before the session, actually, because for me right now I feel very relaxed, and I also heard all the surrounding noises right now very carefully. And I had like a short vision also, like a spiral, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really great, actually.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
ideally, this is a breath that we would be breathing, which actually is 6 breaths per minute. So in 10-second cycles, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. So that's the ideal breath, and breathing deeply as well. So you mentioned, for example, also breathing into the back. So it's so
Hmm.
important because our lungs go all the way up to the clavicle here, but the breath also expanding the rib cage, not just to the front, but to the sides and to the back as well. And so with fascia as well, our fascia, the connective tissue, actually moves, if you're breathing correctly, all the way into the belly as well. It should move around your hips as well. So that's actually imagining the breath going all the way to your hips. Or once you get more into that meditative state, imagining the breath, it's like a full body breath of your energy field, the electromagnetic field, or your aura actually expanding and contracting, because this is something that's happening in nature all the time. Everything's constantly either expanding or contracting, and then that stillness there as well, that moment between that contraction or expansion, there's a moment of stillness as well where the direction changes. So even that stillness is very, I want to say delicious, just that stillness, the silence, the music is between the notes, right? That void that gets created as well is the presence with the breath as well.
Yeah, the present in this moment, it's amazing. I also do a breathing exercise before I go on stage, and I also teach that to my rhetoric trainees. I do the box breathing. Like it's kind of similar what we did, but then you have this, you inhale on 4, you hold on 4, you exhale on 4, and you hold on 4 again. So you extend the break. And it's also because our brain, or a lot of people think like, I will not survive being on stage, so they have stage fright. um, because our brain, our reptile brain, still thinks we are in Stone Age and only the leader could talk in front of the group. And whenever someone else speaks or spoke, it was a confrontation with the leader on death, or the loser had to leave the group. And being in a group was, you needed that for survival. So this is what is going on in our brain. And then you can show your brain, no, I'm relaxed, so there's no danger. And this is what I always do before I go on stage, a calm breath to focus on myself and to stand with my 2 feet on the ground and to connect and to engage with the soil as well, and to go out on stage, have this presence, and then have also a good breath in here, that I can use my instrument, my voice, to speak to people and to open up. So that's from from my side. So it's also very important, the alchemy of voice,
Yeah,
being in front of people
yeah.
and use it
And that's so
correctly.
important as well, of having a steady voice. So even if you're nervous, of actually that, yeah, the power of the breath, like singers as well, right? It's actually so much about the breath. Yeah, so it's beautiful that you're doing all these things, and yeah, teaching people as well to do that.
Yeah. Is there any myth or like promises people say when you do breath work, this and that will change, like promises they shouldn't do? Are there any myth where you say people shouldn't say that?
Oh, this is a topic, I think, in the whole well-being industry as well, of what
Mm-hmm.
we can say and what we can't say. So I would say,
Mm-hmm.
to be on the safe side, yeah, definitely not making any promises, or telling people that it will heal a certain condition, because we don't have that research. But I don't think that breathwork facilitators actually do that. So yeah, I think it's always because we're such complex beings, and I also think that outside of breathwork, it's so powerful for sure, and it can help with our nervous system regulation. But yes, we're complex beings, so I also mentioned, the water, the nutrition, the co-regulations that we have with other people. There's just so much that goes into our well-being and our mental health and our physical health as well, that it's not just like one size fits all. It's not just, breath work will... I mean, I've heard so many amazing stories of people, how it helped them, how breathwork did help them. And there are definitely, there's, for example, this one guy in England who brings now breathwork into prisons because he has been to prison himself. So he now brings it into prisons. There are teachers that are bringing it into their classrooms as well. So there are people that are doing absolutely incredible things with breath. So as such, I don't have that example that I would say someone is claiming something, because I think as well in England there is a lot of legal cases and a lot of health and safety procedures in place. So you have to have insurance as a breathwork facilitator. You have to be part of an association. So it's quite, I guess not everyone does it, but it's quite strict. I know there are other countries where breathwork is more like a new modality, or maybe not as acknowledged yet. So it might be a little bit more tricky. So I would say yes, always check the breathwork facilitator, where they studied, what was the course that they did, because you'll be in their energy, you'll be in their presence, going into an open space. So you also want to know who is holding that space. So it's always good to check.
Exactly. Thank you. And I also like the holistic picture which you gave us about around the whole body, like also the nutrition and sleep and the body itself, and also the surrounding, and when you are in the field of someone else. And one last thing, I think a lot of people try to solve problems with their brain. Do you think we can solve problems with the breath?
Oh, well, that's a good question. When you were speaking, this saying came to mind. There's a saying, follow your heart, but take your brain with you. So it's not one or the other. But if we I actually said that in a session once as well. What if world leaders got together and took a few breaths together before a meeting?
Yeah.
Right? What if they maybe acknowledge their inner child, of saying, hey, my inner child actually feels this. Can we maybe just sit with my inner child and meet my needs? Or, if they actually met on a completely different level of actually everyone hopefully wants the best for their people. So can we actually take a breath and negotiate from that? So yes, breath can definitely help solve things when it's used in the right way. So yes, before any decision making, if you can actually take a breath and maybe also check, where is that decision coming from? Is that actually coming from a fear or a lack of something? And then you're going to take that direction. Or can there be... It's so hard to answer because I'm thinking about like world leaders or financial decisions, or a mother and her child. It might be so... But I think we would all benefit from taking a breath before we make a decision, or before we even speak, right? Like, how many compliments could actually be prevented if we just take a breath and check in with ourselves? So we're coming from that space of responding as opposed to reacting, right? The reaction is the first thing. We just blur something out. Where if we take a breath, it can actually resource us. It can maybe give the other person a moment as well to resource themselves, because arguments or decisions are usually like bam, 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 bam. It's very fast. So if we actually did slow down and felt into where is that decision coming from, what is best not just for me but for the people around me as well. I hope that makes sense, but it's quite a complex question that we could analyze.
It is.
But yes, but definitely take a
Absolutely.
breath. Try it out and
And
see how it works for you.
I'm so with you. A lot of times I also had this imagination, if they would sit together, if they would do a meditation, or as you said, they would breathe together, and they would speak from a part of, or they speak with their heart, they would speak with their heart, I think like, how can you make this decision? And so many people will die from that. So we don't want to talk about this, but the positive impact it would have on the whole wide world. So breaking it down, I love your advice. Just take a breath wherever you are before you speak and before going on stage or have a conversation with your child or whatever. So the very last question, Körper, Kopf, Karriere, which means body, mind, and career. What is your word today from those three, but maybe also surrounding those words like a cloud?
From so body, mind, and career, from the three
Yes.
words, I would say the body. Definitely, it just feels like that's the link to so much, right? To the breath, to our emotions, to our felt sense. Yeah, just feel like that incarnation that we're having, right? We're souls in this physical body. So let's experience the physical body. Let's experience the what we can feel, what we can, yeah, where the breath can guide us. So definitely body.
Yeah, for me as well today, the body. We talked about breath. We talked about being in our body, also breathing in our back, speaking with the voice, and also a bit being in the mind, but more about the oxygen. So definitely the body. And yeah, one very last question right now, last but not least. How can people reach out to you? So you are a breathwork instructor and you also work on a new project like the Untamed Feminine. How can people get in contact with you?
Yes, so empowered breath. So my website is empoweredbreath.co.uk. Also, my email address is simona@empoweredbreath.co.uk. On Instagram as well, empowered breath. Yes, I just touch on that very briefly. I've been very passionate and slightly obsessed about Lilith, the Lilith archetype, the Black Moon Lilith, and the raw feminine, the untamed feminine, the suppressed feminine within us. Not just personally but collectively as well, the conditioning that we have gone through. So yes, when you mentioned the voice and the breath, it's all about that as well, of how can we get back into that resource, that if it is wild feminine, if it is outspoken feminine, if it's the sensual feminine, really there are so many aspects and so many different flavors of the feminine within men as well. So this is not just for women but also for men, where they have been suppressing the feminine. So yes, definitely watch that space. That's one of the projects that I'm working on, and another one is helping people with anxiety and panic attacks. That's definitely a huge one, very close to my heart. As I said, I've been through that myself. So there'll be group sessions as well to teach people. We did some of the techniques today, but many more techniques that they can bring into their everyday life, so they can be resourced, so they can feel more comfortable, more confident as well, more connected to themselves and their breath as well. So yeah, thank you for asking that.
Yeah, sure. I will put everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all your insights. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Janine. Absolute pleasure to connect with you.